Top 5 arguments for the existence of God. Number 1. The Cosmological Argument. Deductive form. A. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. B. The universe had a beginning. C. Therefore, the universe had a cause. D. Therefore, God exists as the necessary and sufficient cause of the universe. The cosmological argument is an argument for the existence of God that is based on the concept of causality, or the idea that everything must have a cause. It asserts that the universe and everything in it had a cause, and that cause must be something outside of itself and sufficient to create it. There are a few different versions of the cosmological argument, but they all generally rely on the idea that the universe cannot be the ultimate cause of itself, and therefore must have been caused by something else. This something else is often referred to as the first cause, or God. One version of the cosmological argument is the Cosmological Argument, which was first developed by Muslim philosophers in the Middle Ages. 1. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. Therefore, the universe has a cause. This argument relies on the premise that everything that begins to exist must have a cause, which is supported by our everyday experience and the laws of physics. We observe that things do not just come into being without any explanation, and the laws of physics also suggest that the universe had a beginning. Therefore, it is reasonable to conclude that the universe must have had a cause. Another version of the cosmological argument is the Leibnizian cosmological argument, which was developed by the German philosopher Gottfried Leibniz in the 17th century. 1. The existence of the universe requires an explanation. 2. The explanation for the existence of the universe must be external to the universe. 3. The explanation for the existence of the universe is God. This argument relies on the premise that the existence of the universe requires an explanation, which seems intuitive. We often seek explanations for why things exist or happen, and it seems natural to ask why the universe exists as well. The second premise asserts that the explanation for the existence of the universe must be external to the universe itself, because if the explanation was within the universe, it would itself need an explanation. Therefore, the explanation for the existence of the universe must be something outside of it. The third premise asserts that this explanation is God, because God is the only being that can be outside of the universe and cause it to exist. There are, of course, counter-arguments and objections to the cosmological argument. One common objection is that the concept of the first cause is unnecessary, and that the universe could have always existed or could have come into being without a cause. Another objection is that the concept of God as the first cause is itself unnecessary, and that there could be other explanations for the existence of the universe. However, proponents of the cosmological argument argue that the concept of the first cause is necessary to explain the existence of the universe, and that the concept of God as the first cause is the most logical and satisfying explanation. They also argue that the concept of the universe always existing or coming into being without a cause is paradoxical and goes against our experience and the laws of physics. Number 2. The Teleological Argument. Deductive form. A. All designs imply a designer. B. There is great design and order in the universe beyond the capabilities of random natural processes. C. Therefore, God exists as the designer of the universe. The teleological argument, also known as the argument from design, is an argument for the existence of God that is based on the idea that the complexity and order of the universe and living things point to the existence of an intelligent designer. The basic idea behind the teleological argument is that the universe and living things exhibit signs of design and purpose, and therefore must have been created by a conscious being. This argument is often compared to the analogy of a watch, which exhibits signs of design and purpose, and therefore must have been created by a watchmaker. There are a few different versions of the teleological argument, but they all generally rely on the idea that the complexity and order of the universe and living things cannot be explained by natural processes alone, and therefore must be the result of an intelligent designer. One version of the teleological argument is the fine-tuning argument, which asserts that the universe exhibits signs of being finely tuned for the existence of life. The fine-tuning of the universe refers to the fact that the fundamental physical constants of the universe appear to be precisely set to allow for the existence of life. For example, if the strength of the strong nuclear force were slightly different, then atoms would be unstable, and life could not exist. The fine-tuning argument asserts that the probability of the fundamental physical constants being set in such a way that allows for the existence of life is extremely low, and therefore the universe must have been designed for the purpose of creating life. This argument is often supported by the anthropic principle, which states that the observed characteristics of the universe must be compatible with the existence of observers within it. Another version of the teleological argument is the argument from complexity, which asserts that the complexity of living things points to the existence of an intelligent designer. This argument is often based on the idea that the complexity of living things, such as the human eye or the human hand or the human brain, cannot be explained by natural processes alone, and therefore must be the result of an intelligent designer. There are, of course, counter-arguments and objections to the teleological argument. One common objection is that the complexity and order of the universe and living things can be explained by natural processes, such as evolution by natural selection. Another objection is that the concept of an intelligent designer is unnecessary, and that the universe and living things could have come into being without a conscious being guiding their development. However, proponents of the teleological argument argue that the complexity and order of the universe and living things cannot be fully explained by natural processes alone, and that the concept of an intelligent designer is the most logical and satisfying explanation. They also argue that the concept of the universe and living things coming into being without a conscious being guiding their development is paradoxical and goes against our experience and intuition. Number 3. The moral argument. Deductive form. A. There are objective moral values and duties. B. The existence of objective moral values and duties requires the existence of a moral lawgiver. C. Therefore, God exists as the moral lawgiver. The moral argument is an argument for the existence of God that is based on the idea that the existence of objective moral values and duties requires the existence of God. The basic idea behind the moral argument is that moral values and duties cannot be explained by natural processes alone, and therefore must be grounded in a higher power. This argument is often based on the idea that moral values and duties are universal and apply to all people, regardless of culture or time period, and therefore must be grounded in something outside of human culture or individual preference. One version of the moral argument is the moral law argument, which asserts that the existence of moral laws points to the existence of a moral lawgiver. This argument is often based on the idea that the concept of moral laws implies the existence of a lawgiver, similar to how the concept of physical laws implies the existence of a lawgiver, such as the laws of gravity implying the existence of a lawgiver in the form of a gravitational force. This argument relies on the premise that there are objective moral values and duties, which is supported by the fact that many people across cultures and time periods have recognized the existence of moral values and duties that apply to all people. The second premise asserts that the existence of these moral values and duties requires the existence of a moral lawgiver, because if there is a moral law, there must be a lawgiver. The third premise asserts that the moral lawgiver is God, because God is the only being that can be the ultimate source of moral values and duties. Another version of the moral argument is the moral awareness argument, which asserts that the existence of moral awareness points to the existence of a moral lawgiver. This argument is based on the idea that moral awareness, or the ability to recognize moral values and duties, cannot be explained by natural processes alone, and therefore must be the result of a higher power. The moral awareness argument goes something like this. 1. There is moral awareness in people. 2. The existence of moral awareness requires the existence of a moral lawgiver. 3. The moral lawgiver is God. This argument relies on the premise that there is moral awareness in people, which is supported by the fact that many people across cultures and time periods have recognized the existence of moral values and duties and have a sense of right and wrong. The second premise asserts that the existence of moral awareness requires the existence of a moral lawgiver, because if there is moral awareness, there must be a source for that awareness. The third premise asserts that the moral lawgiver is God, because God is the only being that can be the ultimate source of moral awareness. There are, of course, counter-arguments and objections to the moral argument. One common objection is that moral values and duties are subjective and culturally relative, and therefore do not require the existence of a higher power. Another objection is that the concept of a moral lawgiver is unnecessary, and that moral values and duties can be explained by natural processes or human reason. However, proponents of the moral argument argue that moral values and duties are universal and apply to all people, regardless of culture or time period, and therefore cannot be fully explained by natural processes or human reason alone. They also argue that the concept of a moral lawgiver is the most logical and satisfying explanation for the existence of moral values and duties. Number 4. The ontological argument. Deductive form. A. God is a being than which none greater can be conceived. B. It is greater to exist in reality than to just exist in the mind. C. Therefore, God exists in reality. The ontological argument is an argument for the existence of God that is based on the concept of God as a being than which none greater can be conceived, and the idea that this being must exist in reality as well as in the mind. The ontological argument was first developed by the medieval philosopher Anselm of Canterbury in the 11th century AD. This argument relies on the premise that the concept of God is that of a being than which none greater can be conceived, which means that God is the greatest being that can be conceived. The second premise asserts that it is greater to exist in reality than just in the mind, because existing in reality means that a being has actual existence and all the qualities and properties that come with it, while existing only in the mind means that a being is just a concept or idea. The third premise follows from the first two, because if God is the greatest being that can be conceived, and it is greater to exist in reality than just in the mind, then it must be that God exists in reality. One way to understand the ontological argument is to consider the concept of God as a maximally great being, which means a being that has all the great-making properties to the greatest possible degree. These properties could include omniscience, knowing everything, omnipotence, being all-powerful, and omnibenevolence, being perfectly good. If such a being exists only in the mind, it would be possible to conceive of a being that is even greater by adding the property of existence in reality to it. However, this would be contradictory, because the concept of a maximally great being includes all the great-making properties to the greatest possible degree, and existence in reality is a great-making property. Therefore, it must be that a maximally great being exists in reality. There are, of course, counter-arguments and objections to the ontological argument. One common objection is that the concept of a being than which none greater can be conceived is meaningless or self-contradictory, and therefore the argument is invalid. Another objection is that the concept of God as a maximally great being is unnecessary, and that there could be other explanations for the existence of the universe or the concept of God. However, proponents of the ontological argument argue that the concept of a being than which none greater can be conceived is meaningful and coherent, and that the concept of God as a maximally great being is the most logical and satisfying explanation for the existence of the universe and the concept of God. They also argue that the concept of God as a maximally great being is necessary to explain the existence of consciousness, reason, and objective moral values and duties, which is a common theme in many arguments for the existence of God. Number 5. Personal theistic experience. Deductive form. A. Many people have had religious experiences. B. Religious experiences provide evidence for the existence of God. C. Therefore, God exists as the being causing these experiences. The personal experience argument is an argument for the existence of God that is based on the idea that God can be experienced through personal encounters or encounters with the divine. The basic idea behind the personal experience argument is that God can be known and experienced through personal revelation or spiritual encounters. This argument is often based on the idea that people have had experiences that they interpret as encounters with God or the divine, and that these experiences provide evidence for the existence of God or theism or supernaturalism in general. One way to understand the personal experience argument is to consider the concept of religious experience, which refers to personal encounters or encounters with the divine that are interpreted as religious in nature. Religious experiences can take many different forms, such as feelings of awe or wonder, feelings of being in the presence of something greater than oneself, or experiences of divine intervention or guidance. An expanded form of the argument is 1. Reliable witnesses and their experiences should be trusted. 2. Many people, past and present, who are reliable witnesses report theistic experiences. 3. Therefore, God exists as the being experienced in these theistic encounters. This argument relies on the premise that people have had religious experiences, which is supported by the fact that many people across cultures and time periods have reported having such experiences. The second premise asserts that religious experiences provide evidence for the existence of God, because if people are having experiences that they interpret as encounters with God or the divine, it is reasonable to conclude that there is something causing these experiences. The third premise follows from the first two, because if people are having religious experiences that provide evidence for the existence of God, it must be that God exists. There are, of course, counter-arguments and objections to the personal experience argument. One common objection is that religious experiences are subjective and cannot be objectively verified, and therefore do not provide reliable evidence for the existence of God. Another objection is that religious experiences can be explained by natural processes, such as psychological or neurological phenomena, and do not require the existence of God. A last counter-argument is that every experience has to be interpreted, and it is uncertain that these experiences can be interpreted objectively or correctly. Usually, religious experiences or even spectacular natural events are interpreted according to a predetermined religious worldview. Nevertheless, a minimal facts case can be made that some form of supernaturalism is true because religious experience is and has been ubiquitous among humanity. It is a lofty claim to assert that all religious experience by all people at all times have been false or can be explained by natural phenomena when natural explanations for all such experience is unreasonable. Overall, critics of this argument would be better served personally evaluating evidence for religious or supernatural experiences in the form of historical documents or present-day accounts rather than dismissing all such religious experiences out of hand because of anti-theistic or anti-supernatural presuppositions. In the end, proponents of the personal experience argument argue that religious experiences are a legitimate form of evidence for the existence of God, and that they cannot be fully explained by natural processes alone. They also argue that religious experiences provide a personal and meaningful way of knowing and experiencing God, and that they can have a transformative effect on people's lives. Please like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. Be sure to leave comments or questions down below for others to consider. For further research, please consult these sources.